This is one of the 4 sectoral presentations covering the most attractive sectors of Ukraine's economy in terms of investment opportunities. In the next several minutes, I will present the country's energy sector. Admittedly, Ukraine's energy market remains backward and too complicated. So we'll first talk about its general features, and after that I will be happy to offer you more detailed information or answer any questions. Ukraine uses various sources to meet its own energy needs. Those include oil, natural gas, coal, nuclear and hydropower, as well as renewable wind and solar power. By 2017, the volume of electricity produced by the power plants included in the United Energy System reached 155 billion kilowatt-hours, 5 billion of which was exported to 5 Western neighboring countries. The power generating capacity of the wholesale electricity market includes nuclear, thermal, hydro and alternative energy generation with an installed capacity of up to 53 gigawatts. What follows is a presentation of the general setup of the market, just to give you a sense of how it works. Nuclear energy, coal and gas remain the main energy sources, while households and industry remain the key consumers of electricity and gas. 4 nuclear and dozens of thermal power plants play a key role in the energy sector of the country, producing about 90% of all Ukrainian electricity. Nuclear energy has a lower cost, while thermal power secures flexibility of supply, which is critical due to intraday variances in power consumption. Electricity and heat production account for 3% of the nation's GDP. Coal, oil and gas mining add another 4% to GDP. Ukraine can satisfy its needs in uranium, but it is dependent on coal, oil and gas imports. The country holds 591 billion cubic meters of confirmed deposits of natural gas, 34 billion tons of coal, a significant share of which is located in eastern Ukraine, occupied by pro-Russian separatists, 118,000 tons of uranium, primarily in the central Kirovograd region, and 55 million tons of oil, including deposits in the Russian-occupied Crimea. Naftogaz of Ukraine, the National Oil and Gas Corporation, is the largest state-owned company which enjoys a dominant position on Ukraine's oil and gas market. Its share in the different subsectors varies from 68% in wholesale gas trading to 100% in gas transit and storage. The regional gas company is a major gas supplier to households with a 64% market share. Energoatom is a large state-owned enterprise managing the country's 4 nuclear power plants and contributing over half of the country's power generation. The coal market has several important players. The largest of them is Pavlohrad Vuhilya with a 29% share of the market. About 1/4 of all coal is imported. DTEK is the largest private company operating in the energy sector and owned by Rinat Akhmetov. The company controls about half of the nation's domestic coal market and about a quarter of its electricity market. Ukraine remains among the least energy-efficient countries in the world. For each $1 of its GDP, the country spends 32 cents on energy, compared with less than 13 cents in the neighboring Poland or Romania. The figure unveils the huge investment potential Ukraine's energy sector holds. The basis of the power sector in Ukraine is the United Energy Systems, or UES, which supports centralized electricity consumption, interact with the power systems of the neighboring countries, and manage the export, import, and transit of electricity. UES brings together the energy generating capacity and distribution networks of Ukrainian regions, bound in an interconnected network of electricity transmission lines. Ukraine is currently reforming its wholesale electricity market, established in 1996, to make it more competitive. Ukraine's energy independence relies on a healthy industry, ruled by market forces every step of the way. To achieve this, the energy sector requires reform. The nature of the reform is only too clear. The energy sector should develop to meet the rules that apply elsewhere in Europe. Currently, the wholesale electricity market operates based on an outdated sole buyer model or pool. The state-owned enterprise Energorinok is the commercial operator of the wholesale electricity market, acting as that sole buyer. Tariffs for electricity are set by a National Commission for State Regulation of Energy and Public Utilities. The tariff is based on the cost of coal, which since March 2016 has been calculated as the average market price of imported coal at the ports of Amsterdam, Rotterdam and Antwerp over the previous 12-month period, plus freight, the so-called Rotterdam Plus formula. This tariff is much higher than the coal price in previous years. President Petro Poroshenko and the owner of Ukraine's major power generating capacity, Rinat Akhmetov, have been accused of unduly benefiting from this formula. Ukraine has put in place a legal framework to enable a competitive gas market. Currently, the domestic gas price is driven by the market demand and supply situation. It is no longer subject to strict regulation as was the case several years ago. Under these circumstances, demonopolization should become the next step towards market liberalization. In 2017, Ukraine increased natural gas production by 2% to 20.5 billion cubic meters, of which 75% was produced by the state-owned corporation of Ukrgazvidobывание. Another 14 billion is imported from EU countries. Households and industry are the largest gas consumers. However, since the Russian invasion into the highly industrialized part of eastern Ukraine, industry has ceased to be the main gas consumer in Ukraine. A sustainable expansion of all types of renewable energy is expected at a rate of up to 12% until 2025 and at least up to 25% until 2035, including all hydropower capabilities. Once renewables get cheaper, their economic and sustainability potential is bound to increase. Public policy should encourage private companies to take on a more proactive role. Decentralized renewable energy generation, currently estimated at around 5% of the country's total household power consumption, should also be stimulated. The share of the electricity sector that uses solid biomass and biogas as an energy source is bound to grow too, which will be encouraged by the relative sustainability of production and the tendency towards the formation of local generating capacity. Preference is given to simultaneous production of thermal and electric power using cogeneration facilities with a view to replacing traditional fossil fuel burning technologies. Hydropower plays an important role in the stability of the UES of Ukraine since it provides the energy system with highly flexible capabilities for regulation of daily schedules of load, coverage of the peaks, and filling night gaps. Moreover, it acts as an emergency capacity reserve. It is necessary to complete the rehabilitation of existing HPP capacity and construction of new HPPs and HAPPs by 2025. This will enable Ukraine to retain the most economically viable and flexible of them in its generation structure while increasing overall generation capacity. The main players on the solar energy market include the members of the Ukrainian Association of Renewable Energy, UARE. One of those companies, the Nikopol Solar Power Project, with a 10.7 megawatt capacity, was launched by a Canadian-based energy investment fund in 2017. The Nikopol solar plant is a world-class asset and a potential growth engine for TIU Canada Limited. Nikopol has some of the best economics in the world for renewable energy. This is the first solar project in the city and one of the largest foreign investments into Nikopol in the past several decades. The energy sector in Ukraine is focused primarily on the domestic market. However, Ukraine also exports electricity and other products. Ukraine is strongly dependent on coal imports, 20 million tons per year, and gas imports, 14 billion cubic meters per year. In 2017, Ukraine increased electricity exports by 29% to 5.2 billion kilowatt-hours, or 3.3% of national production, worth some $244 million. Since the occupation of Donbass, coal export volumes have dropped significantly from 7 to 0.5 million tons, which has turned Ukraine into a net importer of coal. Export value fell to $45 million. Illegal exports to Russia from the occupied Donbass, about 100,000 tons monthly, are not included in these data. At the same time, coal imports reached a record-breaking 20 million tons in 2017. As Ukraine increased coal import volumes in January to May by 20% to 9.2 million tons or $1.2 billion, one can expect a new historical maximum in coal imports in 2018. Availability of various types of energy resources in Ukraine, the creation of a competitive market environment and conditions for consistent development of the resource base for nuclear energy, modernization of generating capabilities and substitution of fossil fuels for alternative fuels, further exploration and extraction of hydrocarbons, and an increased share of renewable energy will all be contributing to promoting the strengthening of Ukraine's position in sustainable energy production and its consumption. Proceeding from the current state of the industry, the priority tasks of the power industry of Ukraine for the development of energy resources and the growth of the Ukrainian economy are as follows: completion of the formation of the electric power market, integration of the power grids between Ukraine and Europe, development of network infrastructure, modernization of existing generating capacity, modernization and development of trunk and distribution networks, increasing the share of flexible capacity in the overall balance, construction of the third and fourth power units at the Khmelnytsky NPP, development of renewable energy sources, construction of power generating facilities to replace assets that will be decommissioned. Integration of European energy standards into Ukrainian legislation will considerably increase Ukraine's resilience to any attempts to politicize international relations in the field of energy, while joining the general European market will help liberalize and demonopolize internal energy markets, make them more transparent and competitive. Transformation and integration of markets will be possible only if consumers become one of the key market players. In 2017, privatization processes were reactivated primarily in the electricity sector. 90% of $120 million worth of privatization proceeds came from the electricity generating and electricity distributing subsectors. In 2018, Ukraine plans to sell off $800 million worth of assets, of which at least $300 million is the value of the controlling interest in the Center Energo generating company and 6 regional distribution companies. Minor stakes in 2 distributors as well as several individual thermal and heat power plants are also on the privatization list. There are a number of international projects and programs aimed at helping Ukraine transform its energy sector. Deutsche Gesellschaft für internationale Zusammenarbeit, or GIZ, establishment of energy agencies in Ukraine project. Ukraine Energy Efficiency in Municipalities, program to support the green modernization of Ukrainian economy, energy efficiency in companies. The EU for Energy initiative covers all EU support to improve energy supply, security and connectivity, as well as to promote energy efficiency and the use of renewables in the Eastern partner countries, including Ukraine. USAID energy programs seeking to improve Ukraine's energy efficiency and reduce the country's critical dependence on energy imports. G7 energy sector support for Ukraine has launched the Rome Energy Security Initiative. The energy sector is unique and a number of energy industry stakeholders play a key role in it, namely the Ministry of Energy and Coal, the state-owned enterprise Energorynek, the centralized dispatching system CENEC Ukrenergo, the State Energy Inspectorate NCR-ECU, the state regulatory body in the field of energy and utilities, and Naftogaz of Ukraine as a huge state-owned monopolist on the oil and gas market. That is why the Ukrainian energy market has high barriers to entry, excessive vertical integration, and limited import alternatives. The market needs a genuine demonopolization of the sector, coupled with a modern regulatory framework as a first step on the path to a fully liberalized market. The good news is that the situation has already started to change for the better. Recently, a relatively free gas market has been created, and Parliament passed legislation to create a competitive environment in the electricity sector that will help modernize the systems. The law, effective from July 1, 2019, was conceived in accordance with the EU's third energy package. As Ukraine continues to harmonize its regulations and practices with the EU, this initiative creates a robust framework to introduce modern practices that have been accepted in Europe, such as intraday trading, a bilateral agreements market, and an ancillary services market. The law creates normative prerequisites to synchronize Ukraine's energy system with that of Europe, which will enable the country to realize its export potential and obtain guarantees from the EU system operators that ensure the safety of the system. In Ukraine, there are several investment websites which feature business projects for attracting investors as well as proposals for the sale of operating enterprises. the following could be of help when looking for investment opportunities. Ukraine Invest, created to attract and support investments in Ukraine, provide investors with real-world information and advice on doing business in the country. Ukrainian Chamber of Commerce and Industry Investment Portal, the Canada-Ukraine Chamber of Commerce, the investment platform for venture capitalists Startup Network, Ukrainian business portal Euroinvest, and High Castle, an online investment market for private equity and other alternative investments based on distributed ledger technology. The investment attractiveness of the Ukrainian economy, and specifically of its energy sector, remains very high. Renewable energy remains the most attractive subsector and therefore attracts new investments. Gas, petrochemicals, energy distribution and fuel elements markets should also be considered as investment opportunities.